Hey, what's going on, everyone? Okay, I'm gonna open up a file here. Give me a second, because I need it for the live. Oops. Okay, so you guys, let's see. Just close a few tabs. Okay. Okay, cool. All right. Okay, so let me share this really quick. Share in the group. Okay. All right, guys. So we'll wait a little bit, and then we'll rock and roll. I got my notes here today. We'll just kind of go down the list. We're going to be talking about why people that use medical drugs chronically seem to look and feel worse year after year. So I've been, you know, in the health field for like 40 years, really. It kind of started with my grandmother raising me off grid on a biodynamic farm in Ukraine, where I learned about sustainable health systems and all that stuff. Let me just make sure this is plugged in. Sustainable health systems and all that stuff. Can you guys let me know if my sound is pretty clear? Okay, yeah, it is picking it up. Okay, cool. Testing, testing. Give me a sec. All right. And again, if you guys have any questions at all, just let me know. So yeah, I've been in the health field for like, 40 years indirectly. Robert, what is going on? Hope you guys are doing well. And guys, if you guys have any questions at all on anything, I might not have the answer, but just let me know and I'll be happy to try to answer it for you guys. But for the live today, we'll be talking about why people that use medical drugs chronically seem to look and feel worse year after year, where, common sense would say like, oh, if you take all these medical drugs, you should be feeling better and looking better year after year, et cetera, et cetera. But, I've been doing this, like I said, for 40 years total, but really like 21 years professionally. Even 21 years is quite a long time. And just from, common sense observation, you guys, it's the weekend. Literally go outside anywhere in America and like 9 out of 10 people you run into are full of obesity, misery, and disease. And if you speak to a lot of these people, they're like, yeah, I'm on, I'm on high blood pressure, cholesterol, antidepressant, and some other random medication, maybe some anti-inflammatory for their joint pain or whatever. And you see them like on all of these drugs, and they still look terrible. They still look terrible. They feel terrible. They're typically still very, very overweight. And you think like, what gives? If they're on so many of these, super scientifically proven and very advanced medical drugs, they should be like looking better and feeling better, et cetera, et cetera, mentally or physically. And you talk to them a lot of times, they're just like very miserable and burned out as well. And you got to ask yourself the deeper question of like, what is going on? You would think like the more medical drugs people are on, the better they would feel. But it seems like the more medical drugs people are on, the worse they look and the worse they feel. So I'm just trying to return back to common sense here, common sense healthcare. And this is like a very serious issue. And a few people are starting to talk about it for sure, thankfully. But it's really under the radar for like 90% of Americans. And, it's 2025 and, Americans are mentally and physically the sickest humans in all of human history, and more medically drugged out than ever before. I think like 70% of Americans use medical drugs right now on a chronic basis. And I think like a decent amount of those are on 4 or more medical drugs. But still, mentally and physically the sickest humans in all of human history. And a lot of them are like so naive or in a state of being completely problem unaware that they think this is completely normal. So this is a very, very important topic, and it's critical because, if we don't talk about this, if we don't put light on it, having, U.S. citizens in this kind of state of normalized obesity, misery, medical drug dependence, and disease is not helping them in any way. Deep down inside, even for the people that are problem unaware, they know something is wrong. You know what I mean? When they look in the mirror and they see like a person that's completely haggard and overweight and stuff of this sort, they know something is wrong. You know what I mean? And it's not helping anyone by continuing to normalize this. So we need to shine light on it, and we need to start having honest conversations about honest solutions instead of just throwing more and more medical drugs and unnecessary surgeries and injections at the problem, which are clearly not working, because U.S. healthcare has been doing that. I would say really pushing that symptom management model super aggressively, especially since 1970 and on. And Americans have just gotten sicker and sicker. So clearly we need to try to do something different, because if we keep doing more of the same, you're going to keep getting more of the same. Like the saying goes, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And again, it's not normal. Don't get calm and confused with normal. But let's talk about it. So one of the things, I'm going to break this conversation down into two distinct categories. So first, you have to ask yourself, like, how do people find it acceptable to be on so many medical drugs, when they're clearly looking worse year after year and feeling worse year after year, and continuing to be overweight, et cetera, having random skin issues, looking probably like 10 years older than they actually are. You would think they would start asking questions like, hey, I've been on these medical drugs for, my metabolic health issues or mental health issues for like 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and it seems like I'm getting on more and more, but I'm looking worse and worse and feeling worse and worse. Like, what the heck? At least that's what I would ask myself, if I were in that situation. I'm like, well, if I'm taking all this stuff and it's been so many years and I'm just getting worse, then maybe it's not working. Maybe it's throwing off my biochemistry even more and making me even more sick, or maybe it's kind of hiding, what I really need to focus on, et cetera, et cetera. So how people get into this stage is a few different categories, and I have them listed here. So first and foremost, at the end of the day, it really falls down to lack of proper health education. So like with chronic health issues, like let's talk about body fat. There's still a gargantuous amount of people that think their excess weight challenges are related to their genetics in some way. So just looking at this from a very, very common sense, you don't need a PhD perspective. There are basically almost no obese people in the US before like 1970, okay? So the Homo sapien, which is basically us, is one of the 27 plus human species that have come and gone. So we're still here, but there used to be 26 other human species that were around for quite a long time, some of them for hundreds of thousands of years, and some of them for millions of years, and they're completely gone at this point. But the Homo sapien has prevailed. They're actually fairly new, only 250,000 years old. Joseph, what is going on? Only 250,000 years old. Remember, the planet Earth is like 4.5 billion years old. These estimates sometimes change, and the universe is 11 billion years old. So in comparison to those numbers, the human race is quite new, 250,000 years. But in 250,000 years, the human central nervous system, or its DNA, hasn't even changed at all. It's basically the same. And in fact, your central nervous system, which is your brain and your spinal cord, is basically encased in a skull. It doesn't even see the outside world, and it still thinks you're basically some caveman, stuck in a cave 30,000 years ago that eats berries from time to time. So it hasn't changed. And again, there's almost no obese people in the US before 1970. So if the DNA hasn't changed in 250,000 years, how could it possibly be genetics? And you can look at a lot of tribal societies. Not only do, teenagers not have acne in tribal societies, but also you don't see any obese people. You know what I mean? So this is completely false. Like people that struggle with weight challenge, it has nothing to do with your genetics at all. And that's one of the things that kind of keeps people in this kind of cycle of using medical drugs, because if they think their weight challenges are due to genetics, then they're like, well, I got to use Ozempic because what else can I do? It turns you into this kind of like victim mentality, and that's going to create a quicksand of misery, obesity, and disease. Trust me, and I'm going to explain why in a few minutes here. But remember, almost no obese people before 1970, and it's the same exact thing for like metabolic health issues. What is metabolic health? So metabolic health has a few markers. We're looking at average blood glucose levels. We're looking at triglycerides, blood pressure, HDL. So those are mainly, and also body fat percentage. Sometimes with metabolic health, they measure waist circumference, but I think body fat percentage is a far more accurate metric to calculate. And a good thing if people are interested in having a very reliable source of measuring your body fat, you can get a DEXA scan done. Gold standard for body fat testing. Okay, so a lot of times when people are dealing with metabolic health issues, which 90% of Americans are now metabolically sick, so like their blood pressure, their triglycerides, HDL, resting blood glucose levels, etc., they pretty much, the bulk majority of them think their issues are due to genetics, which again is like due to poor education, okay, and the normalization of mental and physical pathology in American culture. All right, so with the common one, blood pressure is quite serious. You have 900,000 Americans dying from heart disease every single year from cardiovascular complications. So that's a lot. That's almost 1 million Americans dying every single year, and a million families, which say like have a couple of family members. That's impacting millions of people negatively every single year, and also the economy, because as a person dies from a heart attack, they're not going to be paying into the tax system, contributing into the workforce, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a very, very serious issue for sure. But if you look at familial hypertension, so a lot of times when people struggle with high blood pressure, they're like, well, my dad had it and my dad's dad had it, et cetera. Well, one thing that your dad had is probably a belief system that working yourself to death, and also just living unsustainably was the right thing to do. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying that's just how they learn to survive in the external world. It's all of us. It's our first time being on this floating rock in infinite space. You can't know everything. And your dad tried his best, I'm sure, but overworked himself, shamed himself when he wasn't working a tremendous amount, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, you picked up a lot of these habits and you did the same exact thing. Hypertension, what does that mean? Too much tension. So the person has too much tension in life. And I've, been coaching people with metabolic health issues for 21 years. And through extremely basic health principles, have never had a person's blood pressure remain clinically high, once these principles are actually implemented correctly. What are these principles? Just like sleeping well, teaching them like, hey, it's not normal to work 80 hours a week in a toxic work environment. You know what I mean? Of course, that's going to shoot up your blood pressure, especially when that work isn't aligned with your core values and mission statement in life, et cetera, et cetera. No, it's not normal to be, 20, 30 pounds overweight. And no, it's not normal to not use your body in a physical way. Again, the human DNA, it's active and passive tissue, it's central nervous system tissue. It hasn't even changed in like 250,000 years, and it's evolved to have low intensity dynamic movement consistently. So obviously when you're not doing all that stuff, you're going to have side effects. One of the side effects for many people is just high blood pressure, and they get to their 30s or 40s and they're like, it must be because of my age. It's not because of your age. It's just you're living out of alignment. You're not living like a human being. Maybe for my research, you guys can go to pubmed.gov. Don't take my word for anything. Please do your own research all the time. PubMed.gov is a medical health study library. You can find literally almost any study on any health-related topic there. It's for free. And in fact, when your doctors are looking for answers for your questions, they're going on PubMed.gov and searching those studies as well, okay? So if you look it up, familial hypertension, meaning there's chronically high blood pressure. No matter what you do, it maybe affects 1 out of every 500 Americans, 550. Okay, so let's just say 500 on the lower end. Okay, but how about the other 499 out of those 500 Americans? I guarantee you it's like very slim chance that you're one of those 5 out of the 500, okay? Very, very low chance. And again, in 21 years of clinical practice now, I've had people come in with blood pressure through the roof, taking blood pressure meds for like 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And then like basic health principles are implemented, get him to live like a human being again. 3 months later, their blood pressure is normalized. Like, dude, what the hell? Come on, guys, let's return back to common sense healthcare again. This is like total sickness and pathology normalized as 101, okay? Same thing with testosterone. Males in America have chronically low testosterone, okay? And they're like, well, it's my age. Again, it's my genetics. No, trust me, you're just living out of alignment. There are a lot of reasons for low testosterone. Most common reasons is just people are overweight. And then the myriad of things that have to happen for a person to become overweight also lead to low testosterone, such as overworking, being in a very stressed and myopic state all the time, not being on a proper workout routine, doing high intensity training all the time, like CrossFit or HIIT workouts, which I recommend no one to do. Things of this sort, having a poor diet. A lot of people forget that, everything about you is made out of food. So you can't be eating sick animals and plants grown with harmful chemicals and then expect to be healthy yourself. Not only is your body made out of food, but your brain that produces your thoughts is made out of food. And inflammation always begins in the body and leads to inflammation in the brain, and thus distorts your conscious perception of the external world, okay? In a negative way, never in a positive way. At least I've never seen it done. And same exact thing, guys, with depression. There's still like pretty much all Americans think depression is like genetic, okay? There are countless studies. Let me see. Let me try to find it here. Hopefully. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the chemical imbalance theory of depression has been disproven God knows how long ago, but people still believe like there's some kind of chemical imbalance in my brain and my depression is solely due to that chemical imbalance. Well, I challenge you to go to PubMed.gov or ChatGPT or whatever and find a single conclusive study that shows a chemical imbalance in my brain is leading to my depression, and that is the sole reason, etc., etc. There's a really good study that I just recently read. It was done in 2022 by the University College of London that also concluded, the serotonin theory of depression, there is no correlation, okay? So guys, again, it's people living out of alignment, not living like human beings again, and kind of normalizing mental and physical pathology in their life, thinking this is how life is when it's not. So let's go to step 3. Let me cross these guys off, get a sip of coffee, and then continue the chat here. Manuel, Joseph, Nars, good to see you guys. So, okay. Another thing that keeps people stuck in using medical drugs for chronic health issues such as metabolic health issues, testosterone, depression, etc., excess weight, is they think they've tried everything. I hear this so often. They're like, oh, I have 20 excess pounds and I've tried everything. And I already know, like, guys, so just so you know, like metabolic health issues like blood pressure, those markers I mentioned, triglycerides, not genetics, resting blood glucose levels, etc., at least for type 2 diabetes, for sure, not genetic. These are like the ABCs of health and wellness. So when a person says they're kind of struggling with these things or excess weight challenges, it automatically tells you like they don't even know the ABCs. They don't even know the alphabet. So obviously they're not going to be able to speak English or write in English, etc., etc., So that's already a huge indication that this person lacks severe basic knowledge, has a severe lack of this knowledge, okay? Or an inability to apply it as well. I met many people in my field that have PhDs and masters and MDs, and they're actually quite smart, but many of them cannot apply it in the real world, And knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. That's where you get the benefit from, all right? But I hear this quite often. They say, I tried everything. Just a few months ago, I spoke to this kind of real estate guy that I ran into. He was like from Las Vegas, and he was asking me, he's like, oh man, you look really fit, like blah, blah, blah. What are you doing? I've been trying to lose weight, and, I've had a heart attack 15 years ago or whatever. And nothing works, you know what I mean? So remember, it's important to be humble, and you may have tried everything you know, but you haven't tried everything. And I've had to hire a lot of people to help me over the years with various things too. I don't know everything. And it's so stupid to think you do know everything. It's so silly and naive. Like all your role models, all the executives, CEOs, etc., anyone that makes it to the top of any field has had so many mentors and so many teachers, great teachers, etc., etc. They have not done it themselves. Or great friends that also have a lot of knowledge that passed it down to these guys. They have not done it to themselves. And if you think, moreover, that you're going to solve a problem with the same belief system that led to the problem, that's extremely foolish and naive and just going to keep you running on a hamster wheel very hard and not going anywhere. So you just got to humble yourself and got to get back into a state of reality. It's quite important. But yeah, he was talking about like I had a heart attack. So 50% of people die on their first heart attack. So if you had a heart attack and you made it out alive, just consider yourself extremely, extremely lucky. Had another chance, so don't ruin it. And I'm like, what have you tried, to lose this 20 pounds? Oh, it never comes off. Like, what have you tried though? Oh, like I do a lot of cardio. And first of all, like looking at the person, he's like extremely haggard. So you can see he's running on extreme levels of adrenal fatigue, which indicates that he's also not living sustainably, which indicates like a myriad of things about his belief system that need to be changed and need to be more health centered. Because if that is not changed, then, the same problems will keep on arising, because it's oftentimes, don't worry about, unless it's like a car accident, of course, or something super serious like this. With chronic health issues, just worry about changing the person that's causing the disease, and the disease will go away on its own. And don't focus too heavily on the disease itself. And he's like, oh, I've been doing a lot of cardio and this and that. And I'm like, oh, well, you don't even need to do cardio to lose weight. Oh, yeah. And he's like, oh, I've been doing a lot of fasting. I'm like, why do you do fasting? He's like, oh, I don't know. I read it on some Yahoo article, And he's like, I eat healthy. And I'm like, well, what is your definition of healthy eating? And he's like, well, I only eat, I like burritos out of the frozen section or something like abysmally, like completely, basically doesn't know anything. I don't know the right words to say. It basically doesn't know anything about nutrition. And that's the point. Like a lot of times when people say like, I eat healthy, an easy way to tell that they don't know what they're talking about is when you ask them like, oh, what do you mean by healthy? They say something like very short and brief, like I eat less, or I'm doing fasting, or some other like bogus trendy diet like keto or blue zone diet or something of this sort. So you guys, I did a long podcast on this. The best diet is one that is built out specifically for you. There is no best diet. And it depends on your metabolic health, your metabolic type, what your goals are, where you're starting currently, your current lean muscle mass to fat ratio, your digestive health, etc., etc., So that's it. So anytime you catch anyone saying anything in absolutes, like just do this, just use this system, immediately run. Because there are no absolutes. There aren't, and if all these quick fixes worked, it would all be fixed by now. But as of 2025, Americans are mentally and physically the sickest humans in all of human history, and delusionally medically drugged out, thinking like, looking worse, like terrible year after year, feeling terrible, and still thinking these medical drugs are helping them. So come on, it's time to start being a bit realistic here and coming back into reality. Or they say, like I hired an in-person trainer, still can't lose weight. So you guys, first off, just like in any field, you guys have to understand that most people just suck at their work. That's it. And they're incompetent, or they just don't care, or they're just burned out, or something of this sort. So with in-person trainers, just know it's like a very easy field to get into, okay? In a lot of states, you don't even need a certification. You just need like not even a high school degree, et cetera, et cetera. So just because you hired an in-person trainer literally tells me nothing, because 98% of them are just basically rent-a-friends, and that's it. And some easy ways to tell if you're dealing with an actual professional trainer versus like some bogus rent-a-friend is when first meeting you, did they do like a 2 to 3 hour assessment? No? Okay, rent-a-friend. Are you showing up to the training sessions and they're asking you like, oh, what do you want to train today? Are they doing that? If they are, then they're a rent-a-friend. Are they chatting with you in between sets like a friend? They're rent-a-friend. They're not your coach, okay? And in fact, a lot of times when people train with these trainers, you can see the clients look the same year after year, year after year after year. They're paying like $100 a session. It's total bogus, you know? Another thing is, are they on their phone or off to the corner while they're coaching you or whatever? You know what I mean? All these like common sense things. Certifications mean nothing in that field either. A lot of these certifications you can get, pretty much all of them actually, you can get like over a weekend, you know? And that's it. And that's it. You're a certified personal trainer. And again, in a lot of states, you don't even need a certification on top of that. Okay, and stuff of that sort. So there's a lot of other things to look for, but trust me, most trainers are so bogus. In-person training is kind of a starter position as well with an extremely high turnover. And on top of that, the trainers that are very good, and there are many that are even way better than me, and are still doing in-person training, they basically assess you in person. And they do these amazing assessments, which are beyond valuable, and then give you a program and maybe spend like a week kind of showing you what to do, but they're not there to count your reps. You know what I mean? They don't do that kind of coaching. At least I don't know almost anyone that does that. So, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so watch out for that, and don't spend your money foolishly on a lot of these rent-a-friends, because that's all they are. Just renting. You're renting a friend. You're renting someone to chat with you, and that's it. Okay. Fourth, what keeps people stuck on using medical drugs for so long? You know, and again, looking worse and feeling worse year after year, not asking any deeper questions. And the reason for that is they're not typically meeting the problem at its correct level, aka they're symptom managing. So the issue, especially in the US healthcare system, is a lot of symptoms originate at the biological level, you know, like high blood pressure, you know what I mean? High triglycerides, low HDL, high body fat percentage, etc. So these are all occurring at the biological level. But the issue most of the time, especially with chronic health issues, is at the thinking and emotional dimension, at an environmental dimension, external environment, and also an issue with education. Again, it's kind of one of those things like everyone thinks they know how to be healthy, but 9 out of 10 Americans right now are metabolically sick. They don't even know the ABCs of health and fitness if you're dealing with metabolic health issues. Metabolic health, again, resting blood glucose, body fat, triglycerides, HDL, blood pressure, those are the ABCs of health and fitness. And if a person doesn't know how to regulate those correctly, that means they don't even know the ABCs. And thus they can't write or read or speak the language, etc., etc. And they'll still confidently tell you, I know what I'm doing. Okay, well, like why are you on so many medical drugs then still? And looking and feeling worse year after year. Just let's have an honest conversation here for once, right? So they're not meeting the problem at its correct level. And when you don't meet the problem at the correct level, the problem persists. That's it. I don't care how well you meet it at the wrong level. If, like, for example, I told you you needed to paint house B, but you painted house A perfectly, like even Michelangelo would be completely proud of how you painted this house. It doesn't matter. You painted the wrong house. You're focusing on the wrong things. You're not meeting the problem at its correct level, and thus the problem will never go away. So something to think about. And that's what keeps people in the loop. And unfortunately, too, then medical drug users, because chronic medical drug use oftentimes throws off many people's biochemistry, aka creates side effects. You need more medical drugs, would then throw off more of your biochemistry, etc. It's a nasty cycle. So let me get a quick sip here, and then we'll continue. Chris, what is going on? Again, if you guys have any questions, let me know. Okay. So a lot of people stay in this state of being medically drugged out too because they're in a myopic state in life in general, and their bandwidth is quite low. And that's oftentimes required, to create honest change, to have the energy to create that change, unfortunately. A lot of people, when they get into these situations of being on so many medical drugs, they're already in that situation because they've been burned out for so long and like normalized misery, obesity, and disease in their life for so long. Even for the few that are in the second stage of change, the ambivalent stage, it's quite hard for them to do that because they just don't have the fuel to make the journey. And this is oftentimes where maybe good coaching will come in helpful for some people, because you can kind of strategize, okay, you have this much energy, let's focus on this part first. And just because you can't solve a problem completely doesn't mean you can't start chipping away at it slowly. And as you start chipping away at the problem slowly, it'll become less daunting. You know what I mean? Because now instead of like 50 things to worry about, like a year later, now you got 40 things to worry about. Then a year later, 30 things. Now the problem is becoming smaller and smaller. And as you chip away at these problems, it'll also free up a lot of your energy too, and let you chip away at the problems even faster, at the remaining problems even faster. But that's one of the problems and unfortunately, a lot of people have normalized this burned out state a tremendous amount too. So they're beyond exhausted, but they've been living this way for so long that they think it's normal. You know what I mean? Where it's not normal at all. It's not normal at all. Trust me. And the first stage, remember, there are like 4 stages to honest change. So the first stage is the problem unaware stage. This person, which is what most medical drug users are in that stage, they're just not aware of the problem. And living in a society that normalizes being mentally and physically ill and medically drugged out doesn't help. It keeps them in this first stage. Now, for the few that leak into the second stage, the lucky few, they oftentimes get stuck there too, because that stage is quite like a quicksand. It's a stage of ambivalence for many people. Like, they know they're overweight, for example, and they hate being overweight, and they know they're causing their own weight challenges, but they don't change, and this is a difficult stage to get out of for many people. And a lot of people just get stuck there and then just get stuck there indefinitely, honestly, sometimes for their whole entire life. And there are a lot of medical drug users in that stage too. The third stage is you start making change. You get out of this ambivalence quicksand and you start creating change. And the third stage, what's important is to keep that momentum going. And then you get into the fourth stage of change, and that's the new you, the one that's healthy enough to not need to be all medically drugged out your entire life and looking and feeling worse year after year. And you guys, I know it's like sometimes comes off a little mean, you know what I mean? Mentioning it this way and being this direct. But I find it's important to be honest and direct, because sugarcoating has gotten people to using medical drugs for this long, and it's not going to help them by continuing to sugarcoat them. It's kind of like seeing a friend that's foolishly wasting their money on gambling or drugs, and saying, oh, it's okay, life is hard, you know what I mean? You're trying your best, etc., etc. That's not helping them. That's just perpetuating the problem, okay? Real friends will come up and tell you, like, in a nice way, but direct way, like, hey, man, this isn't normal. You're totally fucking up your life, and it's not normal to be all medically drugged out all the time, So, okay. 6. Okay, you guys. The last thing, and there are a couple of other things, but the last thing I'm going to mention here of what keeps people stuck on medical drugs their whole entire life is they're surrounded by people stuck on medical drugs their entire life, and with various metabolic health issues and et cetera, et cetera. And that's it. And in their mind, they're like, this is totally normal. This is how life should be, et cetera, et cetera. It's not normal. It's not how life should be. It's not your genetics, unlikely to be your genetics, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And it's not your age. Don't bullshit yourself. Just the problem is like, you're usually the average, like they say, of the 5 people you hang out with most. And if the 5 people you hang out with most, not saying they're bad people, but if they've normalized obesity, misery, medical drug dependence, and disease, that's exactly who you're going to be, because the central nervous system mirrors what's around its external environment to help increase its survival. That's one of its basic biological processes, okay? So that's it. And even if you manage to lose weight or get off your blood pressure medications, whatever, for the majority of people, if they continue to stay in this environment, it's kind of the same as like a person that finished a drug rehab center and then they go back to the neighborhood with all the druggies. You don't need a PhD in psychology to know this person is going to return back to using drugs. And that's exactly what happens when people lose weight, and 98% of people regain all their weight within 2 to 3 years that try to approach their weight challenges through foolishly thinking, like, I just need to change my diet and exercise program and take stupid medical drugs, relapse. 98% 2 years later. In my opinion, with that high failure rate, why even try? Why? It's just discouraging to lose weight and then regain it all over again. So you have to approach it honestly through various vantage points, and it's critical to meet the problem at the level of the problem. And where that problem is going to vary from person to person. That's why I mentioned, don't listen to anyone that says anything in absolutes. Without knowing you and your specific situation, they should not be giving health advice. And if you do hear people giving any opinions online, just take it as a general idea to look further into and see if it applies to you. And I say this so often on the lives, okay? So don't blindly go on TikTok and think just getting snippets of information is going to solve your problems. It's not, because these people have never met you. If they've never met you, how do they know your situation? What's important to you? And how based off that, like, how are they going to give you the advice? You know, come on, let's use some common sense. And that goes with me too. Don't blindly listen to me. You know, these are things I've done with clients that I've thoroughly assessed. I do like an hour Q&A upon first meeting them, then an hour lifestyle assessment, then an hour mechanical assessment, then an hour program overview, and weekly follow-ups, weekly one-on-one calls with clients to touch base and get to know them a lot better in their unique struggles, so I can provide them exact advice. And then later on in the program, I do a lot of personality typing as well. So it's like 4 to 5 hours of assessments per program on top of weekly follow-ups for many months. Okay? That's the appropriate way to give a person advice, not through TikTok, or you show up to a doctor's office and they chat with you for 2 minutes and then here's some drugs and then get the fuck out. That's not what healthcare looks like. Okay, so those are the things, among various other things, that keep people in a state of normalized medical drug use, obesity, misery, and disease. And again, looking and feeling worse year after year. I've never seen anyone on a bunch of medical drugs looking good, having good skin, you know, or feeling good, or being happy. You talk to the people, and 2 to 3 layers into the conversation, you realize how like miserable they are, you know what I mean, and burned out and lost in many ways, etc., etc. All right. And because they use these medical drugs and they think they're working, they don't ask deeper questions. Okay. It acts as a crutch for them to keep being the person that led to all their problems, to keep status quo, to not change anything, not change any of their behaviors that are leading to all these issues. You know, so instead of, you know, maybe taking on a less stressful job, they take blood pressure meds. You know what I mean? But they miss the point that whatever belief system led to you accepting working in a very stressful environment for long periods of time, if that's not dealt with and changed, and you take just blood pressure medication thinking that's going to fix everything, that's going to lead to a myriad of other mental and physical health challenges throughout your life. Most likely. No absolutes. There's some super minor exceptions. You can find a person that's been smoking a pack of cigarettes a day and probably live to 100. But the rest of the 99%, that's probably what's going to happen. So, okay. And then, for example, what happens when people don't ask these deeper questions? They don't have a chance to learn, you know, how to actually be healthy and live life sustainably. So like, for example, with depression, let's say a person has depression. Very, very common. It's a symptom, right? It's not a standalone cause. We concluded that already. It's not a chemical imbalance in your brain that's solely leading to your depression. You know what I mean? This is a general consensus among psychologists and psychiatrists. No one really believes the chemical imbalance theory of depression as being the sole cause for depression, okay? So when a person has depression, Mark, what is going on? Oscar as well. When a person has depression, and many still believe this chemical imbalance theory, they're like, well, there's nothing I can do about it. My dad had it, my mom had it, I have it, it's genetics, so I'm going to take antidepressants. Okay. And that's what happens for the majority of people. And honestly, I've never seen a single person on antidepressants that got rid of their depression. In the beginning, they may feel a little bit better, but what happens is if they don't deal with a lot of the underlying issues of their depression, their body habituates to the drug, which is totally normal for pretty much all drugs, and they got to up the dose. And then after a while, it habituates again, they up the dose, and then they max it out. And then they're like, well, let's put you on 2 antidepressants, or 3 or 4. I've known people like on 4 antidepressants that are still depressed, and looking like worse and feeling worse year after year. So when a person just takes these drugs and doesn't ask deeper questions, this is what I see that they miss out on. They miss out on understanding that what is depression? Depression is a symptom of anger turned inwards. Or it's a symptom of having unmet needs for prolonged periods of time. And then you got to ask a little bit of deeper questions. Okay, so does this person even know their core values? Do they even know who they are? You know what I mean? Do they even know their personality and what's important to them, etc.? Their conditioned self or unconditioned self, do they even know these things? Because if they don't know who they are, what do they know? How do they know what core values to live by? How do they know what jobs to get into? How do they know what relationships to get into? They don't. It's like a coin toss. You may guess right. Sometimes people guess right, but in a long enough time frame, guessing never works, right? So these people get into the wrong job occupations, wrong relationships. And when they find themselves in these situations that are misaligned for them, they have to form maladaptive behavior. That's just a normal biological response of the central nervous system when there's a misalignment between the central nervous system and the external world. Maladaptive behavior has to form. And maladaptive behavior varies gargantuously. Very commonly, people abuse food. They stress eat, for example. Alcohol, drugs, have promiscuous sex. Even socially acceptable ideals like becoming a workaholic. Just to dissociate from the fact that there is this huge story gap that is causing their depression. Once again, depression is a symptom of anger turned inwards, at least a symptom at the thinking and emotional dimension, anger turned inwards, or having unmet needs for prolonged periods of time. And my honest question for these people are, how would taking antidepressants have those needs met? You're not meeting the problem at the level of the problem. You're trying to change brain chemistry at the biological level. But the problem in this case, in that example, is at the thinking and emotional dimension. So you're not meeting the problem at its correct level, and thus the problem persists. It's kind of like you're flying an airplane and the alert goes off, like whatever, I don't know anything about airplanes, I'm saying the alert is going off, and you just kind of turn it off. You know what I mean? Not investigate, like, are we flying too close to like maybe a building, another plane, whatever. Maybe we're running out of fuel. Maybe there's some electronic malfunction. No, you just turn it off. And that's kind of like what medical drug users do. They just kind of like have this alert system. The body is producing pain or a symptom to show them like, hey, what you're doing is wrong. And they're like, no, I'm just going to turn it off. Yeah, okay, well, good luck. And this is one of the big reasons why they look and feel worse year after year. So another thing with depression is, they could just simply have digestive issues. They could have gut dysbiosis. A lot of neurotransmitters for the brain are created in the gut. So obviously, if you don't have a healthy digestive system, that's going to have a negative impact in your mind. in the brain chemistry of your mind, which, produces your thoughts. So they're going to obviously not be producing good, healthy thoughts, et cetera, et cetera. Also, there's chronic inflammation. A lot of people have this, and inflammation comes from a myriad of things: too much stress, infections, injuries, a diet that's very high in omega-6 and very low in omega-3 on a chronic basis, et cetera, et cetera. Having a body fat that's too high produces systemic chronic inflammation in all 12 of the human systems. So that needs to be evaluated as well. A lot of times people with depression have lack of physical activity in their life, And obviously the human body has evolved to have low intensity dynamic movement all day, you know what I mean? Serious physical exercise. So obviously if you're not living in tune with nature, with how your body has evolved, you're going to have side effects. And for a lot of people, it's depression and anxiety. A lot of times too, it's important to remember that anxiety is also a symptom or a byproduct of, depression is a symptom or a byproduct of chronic anxiety. So oftentimes for many people, what happens is they're very anxious or have a lot of anxiety for long periods of time. And wherever anxiety goes, depression follows close behind. It's oftentimes a counter created by the central nervous system to get you to slow down for a lot of people as well, because your body's producing too much cortisol in an anxious state. It's a alertness hormone, which is very important, but very limited. So as it's producing more and more, the body's like, hey, I'm going to need this for emergency situations. Let's shut it down and cause symptoms of depression to get this person to slow down. You know what I mean? So we can kind of preserve this important alertness hormone, because remember, the mind, it's encased in a skull. It doesn't see the outside world, and it still thinks you're like a caveman living like 30, 40, 50,000 years ago in like some dark cave eating berries and running away from a bear. So it's thinking like, I need this cortisol to be alert enough to be able to escape a bear attack, for example, okay? And stuff of this sort, Let me see, I'm reading my notes here. See, I always have a problem with writing in a way where I can't even read my own writing. Yeah, and a lot of times it robs them of deep introspection, you know what I mean? To maybe uncover who they really are, So like, for example, the central nervous system, its only role is to get you to survive better in the external world. And one of the ways it does this, according to some theories, and a theory that I follow, is to create a personality type for you. And there are like 9 different personality types, okay? And a personality type is typically created or starts being created around the age of 6 to 12 months, all right? And then it kind of progresses by first mirroring your parents, and then your surroundings, and then your friends, and then your work environment, culture, et cetera, all right? And there are 9 different personality types. There is no good or bad personality types. They're just unhealthy and healthy versions or expressions of these types, And inherent in every personality type is like a great fear, you know what I mean? And that's what kind of motivates the organism. Avoiding this type of fear response is what motivates the organism to look externally into the external world and seek achievement there. So like, for example, for a type, 2 personality type, and again, there are 9 of them, their greatest fear is, I am worthless, for example. But another great fear could be, I am imperfect, or I am unlovable, or I am powerless, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously, if you believe any of these things, if you truly believe like, hey, I am worthless, that's quite painful. And the biological organism will do anything possible to avoid the realization of that fear. So for example, if it fears like, I am worthless, it will spend its entire life trying to prove its worth, to disprove the hypothesis of I am worthless. You know what I mean? And the problem with that is inevitably you're kind of reinforcing, they mirror each other. You know what I mean? So when you're trying to disprove you are worthless, you are more and more proving that you believed that you were worthless to begin with. You know what I mean? So a lot of times people seek worth to, for example, in this situation, in whatever is socially acceptable in their niche. So if they're like born to academians, they'll seek worth by getting like a master's degree or a PhD or becoming a well-known professor or researcher. If they're in like the military fields, they'll seek out worth by becoming a very proficient soldier or officer, enlisted or officer, etc., and stuff of this sort. But inevitably, the false self, which is a counter to the false core of I am worthless, is a false conclusion. You know what I mean? So you obviously can't get the right solution with the false conclusion. So what happens is a lot of times people pursue the wrong jobs, the wrong relationships, try and prove their worth, etc., and it never works. It does provide sugar highs at best, but then you spend a few years working really hard to achieve something, then you achieve it, and then you're like back to feeling empty or worthless or whatever, powerless, etc., or imperfect. And again, you pursue like another goal. You're like, well, it's because that wasn't enough. You know what I mean? If I just achieved this one other thing, it would all work out and everything would be perfect and I'll be happy and everyone around me would be happy and there'd be no more problems. And it's just never the case. You know what I mean? And you get into like 60s or 70s and a lot of people are still trying to do that. Although they've had many cyclical patterns of failure of doing that, they continue to do it. And obviously then, there's maladaptive behavior that needs to form. And for the bulk majority of people, instead of doing this deep introspection and doing this work, they get on medical drugs. And they negate this learning experience for one reason or another. But it's this learning experience, learning about, proper nutrition, using movement as medicine, sleeping cycles, personality types, how personality or the conditioned self forms, what's its purpose in evolution, etc., even kind of going into studying consciousness, all this stuff. That's what makes you healthy. That's what gives you beautiful skin, beautiful hair, great metabolic markers, a high testosterone, all of that stuff. That is what works. In order to be healthy, you have to be healthy and you have to know how to be healthy. And no, you haven't mastered nutrition because you freaking follow a trendy diet like keto or a blue zone diet. That indicates that you're probably abysmally lost, So stuff of this sort. Okay, so that's my point. That is why they look worse and feel worse year after year, because they negate all of this stuff. But it's this stuff that makes you look good, feel well rested, get good sleep, be kind to others, etc. And they totally miss that. Same thing with, we covered, what they missed in antidepressants, what people that take antidepressants miss oftentimes. And I know there's some people that take antidepressants and they do all this work, no doubt, but it's so far in between. And oftentimes what I've seen is it's not honestly done. They're like half-ass attempts at any of these things. And not done consistently enough with enough intensity to really see any meaningful results. That's like literally 90% of people that say they take antidepressants and also do this honest work. That's what I've seen. So same with high blood pressure. It's like when a person has high blood pressure, too much tension in life. Let's kind of look deeper on what is causing all this tension. There's going to be external factors and internal factors, okay? Remember, you can never run away from yourself, all right? And to a degree, you're probably causing just a gargantuous amount of your problems. So you got to change yourself, and that's it. And don't put pressure on it to do it like overnight. It's probably not going to happen overnight because you spent so many years developing these layers of pathology to your personality. But just because you can't solve a problem all at once doesn't mean you can't start chipping away at portions of it, all right? And again, don't think you're going to get the answers by going to TikTok or Instagram and getting quick 10-second clips from your favorite drugged out influencer because that's not going to help you. Trust me, you're going to be so abysmally lost. It's going to be super comical. So same thing with Ozempic. That's super popular now, but it is actually a comical symptom of how delusional and pathological American culture has become, that they need to use something like Ozempic to achieve something as simple as losing a few pounds. This is kind of how silly and comical it's become. And instead of asking deeper questions of why am I consistently overweight, having weight challenges, etc., learning all that stuff that I mentioned also with the depression case. They're like, oh, I just need Ozempic because it's genetics. Again, it's not genetics. It's not genetics because there are almost literally no obese people before 1970, and human DNA hasn't even changed in 250,000 years. And if it was genetics, why, and I say this in the most respectful tone ever, if it was genetics, how come you never see any POWs that are overweight, prisoners of war? They have parasite infections, fungal infections in their digestive system, stress beyond belief. Definitely not definitely in starvation mode, which is another big bogus. There's no such thing as starvation mode. Look, they're all like paper thin. You know what I mean? I'm sure some of them, quote unquote, had the fat gene. Well, why aren't any of them overweight then? Okay, because no such thing. Another thing to consider too, it's what keeps people looking worse and feeling worse on a lot of these medical drugs. A lot of these medical drugs, they throw off your biochemistry with chronic use. So your body is a system of systems. You have 12 systems, 13, if for some people believe there's 13, and they all interact with one another. They all need to be seen as one system. So like, your body can't function without its liver, or its respiratory system, or its cardiovascular system, or its endocrine system, or its skeletal system, or its muscular system, etc., etc. You can't function without any of these things. You know what I mean? It needs all of them. And when you start altering one, it alters all of them. So for example, you can check out this study here. I'm going to give you the numbers. It's actually a very new study and actually very well done. And it tested the impact of chronic drug use. It's a study done in 2025 on top of that, so very new. It tested the impact of chronic medical drug use on the human digestive system, its microbiome. Even years, it's a retrospective study, even years after people stopped taking these drugs, and they showed it still altered the gut microbiome, even years after, let me see what I wrote here, even after people ceased using them. So the drugs examined not only include antibiotics, but also antidepressants, diabetes drugs like metformin, PPIs, among 186 other drugs. So quite extensive. It's been like a few weeks since I read this. And in fact, interesting enough, antidepressants proved to be more impactful in the digestive system than many broad spectrum antibiotics. And remember, many Americans are on multiple antidepressants. Okay, so come on, you guys, let's just use these study, the numbers, you can look them up on pubmed.gov. This one, the one I'm referencing here, the number is 12, 54, 27, 37. There's another really good one. It's the number is 61, 08, 42, 0. That's another great study as well. So when a lot of these drugs are very concentrated. That's how they work. So when you're altering one system, you're altering many systems. You know what I mean? And then when you're altering your digestive system, for example, then how you assimilate food is going to be altered. So even if you're sourcing high quality food, but your digestive system is all jacked up, you're not going to be assimilating a lot of these nutrients. And remember, everything about you is made out of food, including your brain, which produces your thoughts. So obviously, if you're not assimilating the appropriate nutrients or micro molecules, don't expect to be healthy. You know what I mean? It's just real common sense healthcare. And that's what I wanted to cover today, guys. So, of course, don't listen to people online because they don't know your situation. Always do your own due diligence, etc., etc. This is just how I look at things with my clients that I've thoroughly assessed and work one-on-one with, etc., etc. But for my opinion, this is just common sense. When you stop thinking like a sick person, remember, sick people can't make healthy decisions or they wouldn't be sick to begin with. And when you stop thinking like a sick person that has normalized obesity, misery, medical drug dependence, and disease, you'll start seeing this stuff as just like total elementary school common sense info, So I hope this helps, and I hope you guys have a good weekend, okay? And just don't let the external world put your mental or physical health second, honestly, because once you do, misery, medical drug dependence, and disease always follows close behind all the time. So wishing you guys well.